Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Sandra Elkin.
Good evening and welcome to Woman. My guest this evening is Judy Chicago. Judy is a noted young American artist who has exhibited widely. She has lectured at numerous universities and set up several women's art programs. She is the author of Through the Flower. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Sandy.
Judy, why do you think art is important?
Well, that's quite a question for somebody who spent her whole life making art. Well, I think that art is a house for all the hopes and dreams of the human race. And I think that one of the things that has happened in history is that we, as women, have not been able really to live in that house. And therefore, we have not really been able to share in the hopes and dreams and aspirations of the highest vision in culture. And I think one of the things I've been very concerned about is the way art has been sort of swallowed up and held like a little like a faucet who's with the spigot off and only a little of it gets out. It's like only certain people can have good health care and only certain people can have good food and only certain people can have good houses and only certain people can have art too. And I think that what that has done is it's impoverished us spiritually, and it's particularly been impoverishing to women because one learns about self and the world through images, through all kinds of images, through symbolic images of what the world is like, through how people see it. You know, one is educated to see in a larger way. And I think that's something we as women haven't had, and so we've been dependent on images made by men. That's one thing, is that the images we've had have been primarily images made by men, images of what a woman is, image of what the world looks like. And so we have been really deprived of realizing ourselves because we haven't had pictures that say, this is who I feel I am, and this is who I feel I am. One of the things in my book, that whole section in my book about self-portraits of women dating back to the 13th century, I've shown slides of that work in classes, you know, and when I lecture, and women are just overcome by these images of women as strong, productive, creative people, and it gives them a sense of themselves by looking at that art. So I think that really art is a way to a new self-image for women.
We should probably tell people that throughout the show we're going to show some of your work, and it only represents the last 5 or 6 years.
And only a small portion of the last 5 or 6 years.
Right, but we'll probably keep talking while this is going on. Judy, there's been a lot of talk these days because of your book and because there are a lot more women artists who are coming forward and talking about their work, about feminine art, feminist art. You know, what's the difference? Is there a difference in those two terms?
Well, I think one of the differences can be observed in the slides and the work that's being shown. In my earlier work, I think the first things that were on the screen, like this one, I think could be considered feminine in as much as they're sort of soft and they have certain aspects and coloration that have been associated with feminine and the feminine. But I think my work only later began to get very distinctly feminist. Feminist has to do with a consciousness of what it means to be a woman. And so as I became more conscious, my work began to be informed more and more with that consciousness. And as I went along, one of the things I was really eager to do was find a form, develop a form language that could more easily speak about my consciousness. But the whole history of art has been a set of images that have not really grown out of women's point of view. So it was very hard to find a way to actually bring feminist consciousness into art, in the sense, not making sort of simplistic political art, you know, right on sister, but really beautiful and transformed art that was excellent, but that still reflected a point of view of me as a conscious woman. I mean, we don't have much art like that. And so my later work, I think, begins to get closer and closer to that.
So there's no doubt in your mind that there is a feminist perspective.
Oh, I think there's no doubt.
That is still being debated, right?
Yeah, I think, however, in the art community, although outside the art community it's still not understood, but inside the art community, I think there's no question that there's at least some understanding that there is, in fact, a women's art that is feminist, that has a different point of view. That's very recent. You know, as soon as you have a word, as soon as you have the word feminist art, it exists, even if people don't know what it is. Even if they don't know how to recognize it. There was no word feminist art 5 years ago. There was no word feminist artist. So now that I say I'm a feminist artist, you know, it's only a matter of time before what feminist art is becomes clear. It's, you know, I'm a real symbol maker. It's like you make the word and then the rest follows. If there's no symbol, and that relates to the thing before. If there's no symbol, there's no reality. It's only vague. As soon as there is a symbol, then one can bring all of that unconscious, all those impulses, into the symbol and identify them and grow. And that's what's so important about art.
I'd like you to talk in some detail about how you relate your art to your feminism. Now, some of the slides that we saw a few minutes ago were called Pasadena Lifesavers, the first ones. And those are very early, aren't they, in your work?
Yeah, well, they're about in the middle. I've been showing almost 15 years, so they're about in the middle. And my career, as I discuss in my book, my art career started with work that we haven't looked at because we've only been looking for the last 5 years. But my earliest work was very, very, very abundantly feminine and feminist. And then I moved away from that and then came back. As we look on with the slides, we see it coming back, a clearer female point of view. But in the earlier slides that we were looking at on the screen of Pasadena Lifesavers, I was by then trying to bring feminist perspective into my art, but I didn't have the forms by which to do it. And so they're very, what I call neutralized. That is, unless you really know what the content is, it's hard to understand the paintings. And that has something to do with not only the problem between feminism and art, but the fact that art today, generally, the forms are very far away from reality. There's a big gap between the forms artists use today and where those forms come from inside them. And one of the things that trying to bring my feminism into my art has done is made me conscious of how all of art really needs to be infused with a greater reality. That's one of the reasons people don't understand art. They look at it and they say, what's that got to do with me? What's that got to do with my life? So when I mean, the thing about trying to bring my feminism into my art is actually larger than that. It has to do with trying to bring reality into art again and make art real. Now, it happens that my experiences as a woman are an aspect of reality that I know about but has not existed in art. So I can, by bringing that into my work, and by trying to bring that into my work, and by trying to say, how can I make this experience visible, I'm actually opening up art for a whole wide range of people's real experiences to come in. But that's a new thrust in art. It's a new, of course, it's a returning to like an earlier impulse in art, you know, when people made paintings on the cave of buffaloes, and when in African masks, when they're embodying ancestor spirits. I mean, those are things that are very close to the real pulse of people. Well, my feminism is very close to my real pulse. And so it has been, the difficulty has been, is there has been no room in art as we know it lately for reality. And feminism in my life as a woman is one very important aspect of reality that I want the whole society and culture to face.
You must have felt a tremendous sense of isolation.
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to pull this off all by yourself.
Well, I still feel a sense of isolation. Not so much that there's not a much greater support, but there is than there was 5 years ago. Then I was really isolated, and I was terrified. I mean, I had no idea how far we were going to be able to come in 5 years. I never dreamed that we would come this far. I never dreamed that by 1975 there would be feminist art and feminist art education and feminist perspective across the whole culture, you know. We still have a long way to go, but we've come a long way. And the isolation that I had felt before is different from the isolation that I feel now. Then I felt isolated because of my point of view, and I felt that no one would ever be interested in my point of view. and the culture didn't want to hear about my experiences as a woman. Well, I've discovered that's not true. So on that level of isolation has gone and has passed. But now, where I am now, is I feel isolated only in as much as I need isolation to continue my creative life. The life of the individual and the life of the creative spirit is often an isolated life. And I was just asked a question the other day when I was in Portland about collectivity and individual activity, and that's a great debate in the women's movement. And there came a period when I needed to be in a collective, and then there came a period when I needed, again, the isolation of my studio. And I think that we have to have room for both of those. It's that kind of dialogue between the collective and between mutual support, and then the daring to be an individual and dissent, even from the group that supports you. I mean, it's in that dialogue that civilization moves along, and it's in that dialogue that we as women will grow.
Did the need to write the book come out of the isolation?
The need to write the book, I think, came out of my struggle to get my feminism and my art together. By writing the book, I was able to say, this is my intent. This is what I've been trying to do. This is all the things that I've done as a part of trying to do this. And once I was able to say, this is what I'm trying to do, it's like writing around my pictures, you know. This is what I'm trying to make these pictures be. I mean, this is sort of crude, but it was effective, you know, because once I was able to say, well, you see, this is really what I'm trying to say. I mean, even if I'm not saying it exactly, even if I don't know how to say it yet, this is the best image I know how to make, and I'll put it together with these words. Well, in doing that, in that effort to identify what it was I was after, both in the writing and around my work and in writing the book, I think then I was able to invent forms to do what I wanted to do.
Let's look at what's on the screen now.
Oh, that's from the Reincarnation Triptych. This is George Sand. And the next one will be Virginia Woolf. And the one we just looked at was Madame de Stael. They were three women that I identified with in history. And this is exactly what I was talking about. I knew where these images came from inside me. I may not have known entirely how to make them be everything that was inside me. But first, so the writing helped that, and it helped educate my viewers to understand what I was trying to do. These are from the compressed women who yearn to be butterflies, and they're forms that almost are butterflies. Almost. They wanted to be, though.
When you first started, I'm talking about way back, you know, before any of the support systems developed for you, was there any sensitivity at all to the fact that you might have a different point of view, or that women might?
Oh, no, I mean, absolutely not. When I was struggling to be taken seriously as an artist in the art community, there was no question that if anything revealed, at least this is how I experienced it, that if I revealed that I was a woman in my work would be rejected. In fact, when we see the rejection quintet on the slides a little later, that's what those really deal with, was my struggle, my terror that if I showed what I was really interested in, that I would not be considered a serious artist. There was just no question about it. Now, it might have been that if I had understood more of my history, if I had understood more of how I was really trying to introduce a dissenting point of view, and that new ideas are always resisted in the culture. If I had understood that, maybe I would have been able to stand up to all these people saying, you can't be a woman and an artist, and making fun of Judy's vaginas and all this stuff that they did, you know, which made me feel as if I was really putting something bad into my art by bringing something quite natural into it, you know, so I just hid it all, just pushed it right down, and only I knew what was really in there, you know.
You were actually told you had to make a choice. You can either be a woman or an artist.
Oh, well, of course.
Now be chosen.
Oh, I told you before, I've invented this new term, this new word, woman artist. It's all one word. Can't separate it, right? I mean, I think that the fact that we have an image of the artist he, you know, that's people say it habitually, you know, that is just such a deep concept in the society. And the idea that artists are also she, and that those she's might really have something new and different to say about what being a she artist is instead of a he artist is, well, that's only recently coming to be accepted. And even now there's resistance. For example, now my work is sort of beginning to get more accepted in the art world, you know. So then a younger woman artist who deals with issues that are related to the issues, but they're metaphysical issues and mythological issues. There's a lot of similarity. She's not allowed in because there's only room for me. That's my subject matter. You got it? That's how the art world is dealing with it now. Well, that's her subject matter. She's got the woman's subject matter, and nobody else can have it, right? Like I, myself, am the whole range of, it's crazy. It's just, you know, like letting one in.
Mm-hmm. You have very strong feelings about education. Oh, before we get into that, talk about this one.
Well, this is from the Rejection Quintet. Now, there's this peeling back image, which is probably a major work in my development, because I was peeling back that kind of geometric structure to expose what I really was after. And after I did that, then the butterfly came up free, sort of through the forms. And that's, I think the butterfly has now become the major force in my work. There's the butterfly goddess caged. The butterfly, of course, is an image of liberation. It's a feminine form which has sprouted wings, so that it's an active form. And it's also, I understand and was told by the sisters at the College of St. Catherine's, that the butterfly in Christian imagery is an image of resurrection.
You ultimately started teaching women, other women artists.
Well, around 1970, when I realized that there was this big gap between my consciousness and my art, and I wanted to try and close it, I felt that professionalizing, the process of professionalizing, had actually put me out of contact with a whole part of myself. You know, I'd come, you know, my motorcycle, you know, the motorcycle period of like going to auto body school, my big macho period,
I was just
wearing
going to
boots
ask you,
and
is
smoking
that the boots and
cigars.
cigar?
I mean, it's very humorous now, but what it has to do with is taking on a masculine mode in order to participate in a world whose rules and regulations are dominated by men. That's what it's about, you know. And the process of doing that actually made me out of contact with another part of myself. And so I wanted to recover that. It was like a reclamation project. And I felt that the way to do that would be to reconnect myself with younger women who were just starting, who were still in contact with those impulses and had not themselves started professionalizing yet. Then by helping them professionalize without becoming schizophrenic, without having to deny that part of themselves, I thought that what that would produce for me is that I would then be able to, I would help them professionalize, they would help me come back in contact. It took a while.
Were they ready for that?
Well, see, they didn't have to really do anything for me to get that. I mean, they didn't have to actively work to help me reclaim. All they had to do was take the permission that I was giving them to be themselves and go forward with their art, and take the help I was giving them, and then I learned from watching what they did. It took a number of years for it to become internalized in me. In other words, I kept giving them permission to go forward, and I kept giving them permission to be themselves, and I kept giving them permission to take their work and push it into a huge dimension and take this single sort of impulse that might have to do with putting on makeup, you know, something sort of indigenous to female culture, and just making it makeup and makeup and makeup and makeup and makeup on the walls and makeup on the floor. I mean, I had to like give them that kind of permission until someday it occurred to me and I said, you know, you can be yourself.
What are we looking at now?
We're looking at my recent work, which are porcelains, China painted. I've begun, these are called the Butterfly Goddesses and Other Specimens. They're a series of porcelain miniatures. You know, one of the things about the TV is you can't tell which are big pictures and which are small pictures. These are dimensional. The centers stick out from the back, and they're in little boxes. And they're my most recent work. I begun to China paint. I went really to a subculture of women who have preserved China painting, and I sort of apprenticed myself and learned the art of China painting. And so now, not only my content comes out of my experience as a woman, but my media also is something that has been associated with women. So I think that what that's done is my form and content have finally begun to come together, and I think now I'm actually making feminist art unself-consciously, without thinking about it. Like, I don't go in my studio and say, I'm going to make feminist art. You know, what I've done finally is pull together all these various strands in my development, my aspiration for excellence, my professionalism, my impulses towards change, and my experience as a woman, and I've put them all sort of got them all finally working together. But it's taken quite a long time, and the process of doing that is what my book is about.
Do you also not have to reject anything, former conditioning anymore? I mean, is that also under control?
What do you mean?
Well, ways in which you were conditioned when you were in art school, for instance, to see things in sort of a male perspective and that kind of thing. Does that still happen to you occasionally?
Well, I don't think I'm male identified at all. I don't feel like I have to get approval from men, which I think is really essentially what male identification is, and doing things that in one's mind would please men. I don't think I'm doing that. I have any connection to that at all. However, I am certainly not ready to accept the early women's movement rhetoric that had to do with the idea that aspiration was male, discipline was male, excellence was male. Those things are human. I mean, those are human abilities, the desire for excellence, the aspiration to greatness, the vision of more. Those are human things, and I think that men have been allowed to participate in that level of human development much more than we have. Now, what I've been trying to do is fuse those with those things that we've been allowed: sensitivity and vulnerability and identification with others, a desire to share instead of to hold back. I mean, my whole desire to share art, I think, comes out of the fact that I was conditioned as a woman towards sharing instead of towards protecting, towards defending. And I think what we have to do is fuse the two worlds of male and female to make a more human whole. And one way I'm trying to do that is through my work.
So you don't think it'll be female art versus male art?
Well, I think that at this moment in history, it's female versus male in the world. That's the way the world is. There are two basic classes, you know. I mean, there's a class relationship between men and women as well as a sexual relationship. There's a class relationship, and men dominate. The male class is dominant, and the female class is non-dominant. And in that relationship, art is in exactly the same relationship. I mean, until that is over, until that has changed, and we share equally in the planet, and we function together and in harmony, until then there will be male and female art, you know, and we will not have the whole spectrum. I mean, there's a whole spectrum in between.
I'd like to go back to something we were talking about earlier, and that is the education of women artists. And when you were teaching, you discovered, you say, lots of things about educating women, and women artists in particular.
Well, I think that first the discoveries that I made in Fresno, and then increasingly over the years as feminist art education developed, and now with the Feminist Studio Workshop, which is a much expanded educational program for women, both an intensive program and an outreach program and extension programs which are open to men and women. I think that the process of education that I sort of stumbled on, you know, and it has been developed really very far in terms of methodology, and it has to do with one, organic education, which comes from the center out, instead of people having to address themselves to things out there which they may or may not be interested in. We start by helping people come in contact with who they really are and what they're really interested in, and then from that center, what happens is we try and help people then develop and grow and reach excellence and achieve quality through who they really are, without having to deny the things that really concern them. And I mean, I think it's got a lot of implications for education generally.
History has really neglected women artists, hasn't it?
Wiped them out.
I was afraid you were going to jump off the couch.
Well, I mean, if you think about history altogether,
Yes.
then you realize that by and large it's not history. It's the history of what men have done. I mean, I don't care if women were picking their nose in the 13th century. I would like to know what they were doing, you know. I mean, what were they doing when the men went to war, you know? Now, in the same way, in the same fact that history has been slanted, and that even though there have been an enormous number of women artists, the three major textbooks, even now, art history textbooks, between them only name one woman artist, and I think that's the women who did the Bayeux Tapestry. And all the work of women has just been swallowed up by history. Even women who were very successful in their own times. Even women who made careers for themselves, and there have been a great number of them. Even women who've made careers for themselves and been active. And not only that, then there's the categories of art, you see. For example, not only have the women artists who participated in the mainstream been shafted by being excluded, but then that whole area of art that women have made, quilts and needlework and embroidery, the definition of art, that's not art. See, so if you work in a womanly tradition, that's not art. And if you try and get into the mainstream stream tradition, then you're just excised by history. And that's what's happened to women artists of the past. So we're reclaiming that, of course.
We have some more slides. I think we'll finish out the show, the last couple of minutes that we have just looking at slides. Also, Judy, do you think the general population of women who are not artists, have been alienated from art?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the whole culture has been alienated from art, and even more so women. I mean, I sat in art history classes, and you know, and I know people who aren't artists sit in art appreciation classes, and they look at art made by men that first of all generally degrades women, and if it doesn't degrade women, at least it only shows a perspective that is not full. So in the first place, even the art we're shown, you know, is not that interesting because it's not from our point of view. And second of all, I think that generally people think art doesn't have anything to do with them and is not important to them. And women, for all those reasons, I think have been very alienated from art. One of the things writing on my pictures has done is it's actually helped women, I think, understand what my pictures really are. I tried to demystify the process, you know,
I was shocked the first time I saw one of your paintings with writing on it.
Really?
I really was. I thought, what is she doing?
Oh, I know. It's not supposed to be valid, right?
Right.
I know. Somebody asked me that in Chicago, and my mouth dropped. I said, what do you mean valid? I mean, I wanted to do it. When you're an artist, you're supposed to be able to be omnipotent and do anything you want, right?
Yeah, right. Why do you think so few women artists are successful?
Well, there've actually, as I said, been a lot of women who are artists who have been successful. We just don't know about them. I mean, we've been deprived of that knowledge. And then again, I think that there are a number of reasons. One, there's straight-out discrimination. There has been straight-out discrimination. The discrimination is beginning to change, at least on the level of exhibition policies, like many more women are showing. But the values of art, what is and what is not good art, are still very, very incredibly slanted against women and against women's participation and perspective both. I mean, on the real fundamental level of the art market, the high level of buying and selling, where the real money is and where the real values are, there are very few women.
Judy, we're out of time. Thank you. We've been talking to Judy Chicago, author of Through the Flower. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.
Woman was produced by WNED-TV, which is solely responsible for its content, and was funded by public television stations, the Ford Foundation, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.